Well, there we are. Okay. So I think it's probably hello, Madfinger and Meandering Mystic, and Tamu and Soul Traveler, and a blessed moon day to you all, and a warm greetings to you, very warm. So since there's a few other, I actually want to wait just a little bit, so that some of the things I say, can be heard in real time in case there's any chat implications to it. Well, actually, thank you very much, Tamu. I enjoy that as a thought. Hello, Tam Flower. That's an interesting coincidence. We have Tamu and Tam Flower. So I have a list of things to talk about tonight. Actually organized a little bit. Things do go better with organization, and that's why everything is built up from organisms. The only ism or any derivative of life that's real, that's the time I'm comfortable with the word ism. Otherwise, ism is a very often, to me, a cautionary suffix, because it implies life where often there is none. Hello, MC Wizard. So, Meandering Mystic put up an opus of a video a few nights ago, and I just enjoyed every minute of it. I think I broke it. It's a 3-hour video, maybe 3 hours and 2 minutes. That's 3 hours. And I broke at, I guess, the 2 hour and 14-minute mark because I wanted to put a comment in, and didn't think I was getting ahead of myself, and I wasn't. So Meandering Mystic is the YouTube channel, and if you haven't seen his 3-hour presentation, I recommend finding a time where you may not be ready to get off the internet, but you would like it to be a positive experience. I would check out the video. He brings research, cogent quotes, anecdotes, and the mystic mind, the mystic spirit into looking at things. And it was really, really so well done. And Meandering Mystic, I'm loving the beard that you're growing out. It looks great. Really looks great. Come for the beard, stay for the conversation. It really, I mean, probably one of the best 3-hour presentations I've seen. And Ian, an interesting thing is I watched another 3-hour presentation. I was looking for the link. I'll probably have to wait for it to pop up in one of my feeds. I don't think I'm subscribed to the channel. And I think it was on Zohar Gate, or whatever that is. They can put out some pretty good things, and sometimes they have this one guy who covers Sylvie Ivanova's material, the New Earth material, and he does good presentations of her material, often using her actual videos without her voice. She uses his voice. She has a very pleasant voice. Some people don't enjoy Sylvie's voice. Some people have trouble making out the English through her Bulgarian accent. And plus, she has a sense of humor. I guess not everybody enjoys. I think it's pretty funny. But the narrator for her material, Zohar Gate Productions or something like that. But this gentleman who's been covering it, and he seems like he has a slight hint of an Irish type of accent, hint of it, but really pleasant. But anyway, there was a 3-hour presentation by somebody who usually, in the past, has not quite done it for me in a presentation, and also who he was trying to be, and that person is Michael Tellinger. Of Ubuntu fame, too. But he did a presentation that I don't know if I skipped the first few minutes, but I know in the past he used to come on and greet Archangel Michael and Metatron and all this other New Age silliness, in my opinion, to try and speak to the peeps. And in this one, he just came on, and what I really liked about it was, rather than one could, his own independent research, what he did was he did a presentation. Okay, I saw myself buffering, so I quieted down. I stopped speaking for a second. Hello, Fractal Truth. Michael Tellinger did a presentation that was really acting kind of as a commenting on an aggregate. In other words, he, in many ways, this video was an aggregator video. But he was producing. He really brought up some really great subject material to presence, and things that are kind of based on research, but metaphysical research, and for me, really good things for a Gnostic mind or a Telestic mind to entertain, because of because again, there's data, and then there's the interpretation of data. So I'm always looking for good data that I can then interpret from a Telestic perspective. Hello, Vernon and Mario Heat. So there's a 3-hour video. I think it's from Zohar Gate Productions, and it was featuring Michael Tellinger, and the information that he's bringing is really, really good. And so that surprised me, because I had basically, Tellinger had been boring me for a few years. But he did not bore me in this last one. Matter of fact, and then he closes it with kind of, I guess, a new take on his Ubuntu thing. I think it's called Just One Town. But it closes it closes really well. An excellent presentation, and again, usually 3 hours can be a long time. When 3 hours is just constantly staying, growing, like producing, not staying on anything one too long, and then when it switches into something equally as good as where you just were. Kind of very similar to what Meandering Mystic did in his latest video. And one of the reasons I'm really kind of pointing out time well spent on the internet is because, we unfortunately, in a lot of overall, unfortunately, we have really kind of gotten entrained into the internet, and part of that has to be that so many of us alternative people who are looking for some kind of crowd to hang out with find it increasingly difficult to find those crowds locally, and so they find a cyber crowd. And I understand that because I participate in that. But at the same time, as you're clicking around, I mean, very often I will, like last night, I turned off the internet and played my guitar for some hours and was just doing a bunch of things. And as I did this, I could just feel my energy. Thank you, Madfinger. I could feel my energy building. I could feel my inspiration building. My creativity was just starting to spark and shoot, including some ideas about what I might like to do with my channel, my Mod Wiz channel. And so I kind of woke up in that mood, and then so then I come online and I have a few I like to try and stay abreast of what's going on in the world. So very often at Zero Hedge is where I go. I belong to minds.com, and then I belong to a few forums. The most active forum is the One Truth forum, and to see what's everybody's talking about. What's the conversation, what's the discussion. And invariably, my energy plummets. My spirits diminish. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm mentioning some really uplifting internet experience. Because since we do use the internet, and a part of it is, where we're connecting to like minds, although I'm really, I like the idea of like-hearted rather than like-minded. First of all, the heart is the seat of wisdom. The mind is in the third chakra. And I think that we can sometimes have very different ways we might do things or interpret things, at least in the way we use our language, which is would be the mind most of the time. But I feel if we can be, I think it's a lot cleaner and saner and practical to be like-hearted, because that allows for differences in mind. It actually, wisdom will let you know that each separate person will have a slightly, will be perceiving the world or even the dreaming they're in with, from being in that perception point. So sometimes ideas can clash, but compassion, love, and wisdom usually do not clash. Usually, if there's a clashing, there's somebody's probably getting a bad signal from their heart chakra. Good evening, Jasmine. So, and it can be difficult to use the internet wisely. I mean, really trying to stay up with the conversations happening in the national and the global scene. Ouch. Because there is very little telestic activity on the world scene, and by telestic I mean aim. What's the purpose of it all, other than to know what the various conversations are? And there are discussions, and then there are conversations. And so much of the internet is, to me, filled with conversation instead of discussion. So, on the Telestic front, the Nemeta website, the Nemeta.org website, the portal for the Sophianic Arts and Sciences is now officially launched, and you can sign up for certain courses, but the Planetary Tantra courses are free, but they're still organized, and I was going through some of them. And what's interesting is, having been, reading going to meta history for years, having been a part of the Gaian navigation experience from its inception, which I think was, the inception was 2011, I believe. Again, dates are not something I really even try to really stay up with. But so being, and then of course I'm on any mailing list that John Lamb Lash has, so Meta History mailing list, and now the Nemeta mailing list. And because I'm on the Meta History one, when John has put out some unlisted videos, especially explaining the Shakti cluster, and it makes sense to put them out privately, because if you're not, the Shakti cluster app is not applicable without being within the Sophianic narrative. It operates from an understanding of where one is in the cosmos, especially in the galaxy, and especially on Earth. So I'm going through the free courses on because I think the signing up is well worth it. I just currently have to make sure that all the bills are paid, and so it would be irresponsible of me to devote any funds currently right now to furthering my education, specifically my education that I would like to really get going within planetary Tantra concepts. Planetary Tantra Gnostic concepts is Celestics. The ability to interpret what's going on in the sky, the information that is there, from a very old tradition. And I think also, in the Celestic course John Lamb Lash put together, I do believe there is some modern novelty. And if you know anything about planetary Tantra and how our mother works, novelty is what keeps things fresh and up to date as we grow. I was going to use the word evolve, but currently the human species is on kind of like two tracks, and they kind of go in opposite directions. There is an evolutionary track, but there's also a devolutionary track. And the devolutionary track is the one that it's the older one. It's got at least a couple of thousand years of practice, and praxis. Hello, Mari. And so it has a certain amount of momentum, and without knowing where one is aimed, or being telestic about it, the evolutionary path is often guided by third parties. And some of those parties are on a devolutionary path instead of an evolutionary path. So that's why I used novelty and growth instead of evolution. I don't want to get too lost on that thought there. So Nemeta has been launched. The link is I think is the bottom link on my description. So you can just click on it, or you can just put it in, Nemeta, Nemeta, and it I forget which language it derives from, but it refers to a sacred grove, very druidic in a way. Because in the past, much of learning in our tradition was done in just outside in nature. And so, talking about nature, this is a good way to kind of tie some things together with Meandering Mystics video, because I almost pulled out my my diploma from the Pacific Institute of Aromatherapy to kind of I do have the training, but you'll have to trust me unless somebody goes, I want to see it, in which case I can produce it. But he was speaking about a group of chemicals that occur in nature called terpenes. And terpenes are a huge part of the chemistry, knowing the chemistry of aromatherapy. And there's also a group called sesquiterpenes that are more complicated, but terpenes. And he mentioned some of the mentioned myrcene, pinene, and pinene obviously is one of the ones that you will smell in pine forest. Myrcene, I believe, is one of the more active ingredient, the terpenes in nutmeg. Myrcene is in a few things, and myrcene calms you, can actually help with sleep. And one of the interesting things, like from lemons, when you get limonene, is a terpene from lemons, and it can also be found in some of the other citrus when you peel them in the rinds. There are essential oils, like there is an orange essential oil and a lemon, and so on. And there's two ways of getting those essential oils. One is expressing the peel, that is, you crush it and you squeeze the oil out of it. And the other one is how most of the essential oils are obtained through distillation, which is ideally you use as low a heat as possible, so that you create you create a water vapor that is then captured, and then as the essential oils are carried in that vapor, and then you let them settle and they distill out. The oils are on top and the water is on the bottom. That's how rose water is made. It's also how orange blossom water is made. One cannot make jasmine in that form, in normal heat distillation, because in that case many of the aromatics that make up the scent of jasmine are destroyed by the heat. There's a few. Lilac is another one that is, if you use heat, you won't get the scent. You won't get the scent of lilac. I haven't started yet, Soul Traveler. I'm not sure. Anyway. Hello, Doc Illusion. Salutations. Thank you, MC Wizard. Terpenes, yeah. So, terpenes are very active and very big part of aromatherapy. The interesting thing is, like, the CBD paste I use, the reason why I use it and recommend it, besides it being about 1/3 the price, at least dosage wise, of the oils, of the CBD oils, is that because it uses a very, very low heat and the whole plant to make the paste, all of the terpenes are there. Some of the more chemically or just heat extracted versions that, for a more pure CBD, they actually sometimes what they will do to try and get some more of the synergistic, or what is also known as the entourage effect, where the active ingredient needs the presence of the accompanying phytochemicals to perform correctly. What they will do is they will add, in the sense of like some of the oils, instead of the paste, they'll add terpenes, but they'll add terpenes that come, like in other words, they might add some limonene from a lemon, or in other words, they will take terpenes from other sources to try and reconstitute the CBD oil, and that's Franken-science. Not quite, it's not quite GMO Franken-science, but it is. I mean, to have to put back from other plants what is naturally occurring in the plant because you decided that you need that the pure scientific method is a superior method rather than the more natural extraction method used at mynutra.com to make their CBD paste, is just kind of creating more work, creating more cost for a product that still isn't performing like the simple CBD paste will perform. Hello, Sunshine Sophia. So and then the other thing, okay, so I was talking about there's two ways to get essential oils out of the citrus, and one is the expression method and one is the distillation method. The interesting thing about the expression method is they have where properly cared for distilled oils have like a almost endless shelf life if they're protected from heat and light. Those are the two things that will break down, especially the finer constituents. The one thing that that is the most resistant actually are the terpenes. But terpenes can, by themselves, sometimes can be, especially in isolation or in an essential oil that has been exposed to light or heat or oxidation. You got to keep your bottles tightly sealed. That's the other thing. So it's light, heat, and oxygen. They can be very terpene-y, in which case they can actually, too many terpenes can sometimes be irritating to the skin. They're pretty potent chemicals. So what Meandering Mystic was speaking about in the forest is that there are very fine aerosols that plants release their terpenes into the atmosphere. And he also identified that that within a forest, under the canopy, of course, there's your protection from heat and light, that these terpenes tend to occupy a space that is so far been defined as between 3 feet above the ground and 6 feet above the ground. And as Meandering Mystic correctly spoke of, that basically, 3 feet is about the height you'll be as a child, when you really start getting around. And then, generally speaking, like I'm 6'3", but my nose is under the 6 foot level. So you can kind of see that even where Mother Nature and the wisdom of her trees decide to put that kind of aerosol mist is where it is best apprehended by the human animal. Okay, so back to expressed oil, the citrus oils. So the expressed oils, which are produced by squeezing the rinds and collecting the oil that way don't have as long a shelf life. In other words, because they have a lot more, hello Suzanne, they have a lot more organic material in them. And that organic material is, prone to do what most organic materials do when they're no longer part of something that has the life force in it, or connected to nature, and they break down. So, the expressed essential oils. Okay, the expressed essential oils need to be used relatively quickly upon obtaining them before they get all just plain terpene. But I think there's probably something in them that might not be in the distilled oils. Certainly a greater fragrance. Some of the more fragrant aspects of the phytochemicals. And I got caught up in the chat for a moment. So there's something really special. I mean, again, as an aromatherapist, and well-crafted essential oils are potent alchemy. But when we go out into nature, it's done in a more kind of what one might even be able to call a homeopathic dose. Interestingly enough, eucalyptus oil is very good for clearing up the bronchial tubes. Very good for loosening phlegm. I mean, amazing. You can have like some really stuck phlegm, and you put like a little eucalyptus oil, like especially on a cotton shirt, and let it waft up. You will start clearing. But the interesting thing is, even there, less is more. The founder of the Pacific Institute of Aromatherapy and the PhD there is Kurt Schnaubelt. And he mentions that the most effective way to use eucalyptus oil for decongestion of the lungs is when you can barely smell it. Like, in other words, my people, the normal allopathic thing would be like, oh, let me slather it on so I get great, huge vapors of it. It actually performs less, and when you kind of overwhelm it. So again, it's not, homeopathic is anywhere from very little amounts to when you start getting into actually there's none left there anymore. Which are considered the more potent version, and I understand how it is more potent when one is going into the more subtle parts of our being, of our anatomy, the subtle anatomy. So there is great alchemy, very potent alchemy in the distillation of essential oils, and we wouldn't be able to have a true aromatherapy without that alchemical process. But there is also Mother Nature's alchemy, and very often she will, in her wisdom, because she is wisdom, that's what Sophia means, the way she'll apply these very same things in nature will be at more homeopathic and more subdued levels. They're more potent that way. Part of the reason why I think microdosing and homeopathic things is we are made of subtle energy, which coheres into the animal body. And so the way our more subtle aspects pick up information is it doesn't need huge doses. Actually, it needs the data, and that data is actually best done without an overwhelming of it. So very allopathic is about overwhelming. Homeopathic is about finding the right frequency, or the word here, I mean, we're working with frequencies, but one of the things that sometimes gets lost when we talk about frequencies is amplitude. So the difference between micro dosing and, like, allopathic type dosing, even though allopathic dosing is based on amplitude, one can see, obviously, even in allopathic, one can see that sometimes less is more. That more can be overwhelming. And at the subtle body aspect of ourselves, what some people might call the aura, which is composed of the various subtle bodies, which are correlated with the chakra system. In many ways, each chakra is in its own discrete band, and each subtle body has its own discrete frequency band. And when we're transmitting information to those bands, it's really just a matter that the information is of sufficient amplitude to be apprehended, because it's really it's data to be added into the greater mix, into the greater spectrum. And if there's an over amplification, if the amplitude is too strong, well, then it can imbalance the intent of the dose. Hello, Niche. I think I just answered your question, Doc, without even seeing it. I looked down, I saw your question, and as far as I'm concerned, the last couple of paragraphs were all about that. But much of that was really kind of just riffing off of Meandering Mystic's latest video. And that's what I said. There was so much food for thought and continuity. Hello, Puppet Interrupted. Because one of the things I like to do within, once again, there's a whole kind of system here that, people who come and listen here will very often, I will know, will be listening with C.W. Chanter, Seven Serpents, Saroth the Mage, Meandering Mystic, Niche. There's kind of like a circuit. And so I like to, when Meandering Mystic put out his video, there were so many things that I was inspired by. I said, well, let me add some continuity. So in many ways, this little conversation I did about essential oils and terpenes and dosages was very much continuity of the video that he put out. And I think continuity is great. Continuity builds coherence. Coherence is what forms galaxies, what forms tornadoes. It is what forms energy. The work of Schauberger is all about vortexes, and vortexes are about coherence. And the vortex, what you see in a galaxy. Michael Tellinger gets in that last video gets a lot into those vortexes and the toroidal shapes that come from there are certain interfacing of one could call it almost opposing vortexes, where vortexes are coming from different directions, and then they meet at a point, creating kind of a 0 point, and then the torus shape or the torus energy that gets created in that meeting. It was really, just really good presentation, and again, much of what he was presenting is other people's research, but it all tied together beautifully in a way that I found even, a Telestic look at it, and then the applications that had a name towards who we are and what we're doing worked for me. which is part of where, the title, my title tonight, Nemeta launch, races and objectives. Now, of course, an objective is tied into being aimed, those who are aimed, the telestai, being telestic, that is, having an aim. Having an aim for one's earth walk, for one's spirituality, or mantique, although I haven't heard that word used in a while by John. And when I just use the word John, I am referring to John Lamb Lash, the Gnostic teacher on the internet. And of course, one of the reasons I went to Telestic is because it's planetary. For me, it's planetary, tantric, Gnostic thought. Because there are Christian Gnostics, there are what I call Nagha Gnostics. Of course, the Nag Hammadi texts are what got John inspired. So there. And so the whole thing of, okay, John, again, John is John Lamb Lash. John, I thought it has really constantly referred to the anthropos as the human animal or the human species, and not the human race. And I think that is brilliant and correct. Correct would be probably the proper term, because correct is brilliant. And one of the things is because I feel that even the concept of race is an archontic insertion. And what I mean by that is the word used. It's very clear. Our eyes clearly see that there are differences in the anthropos, and in my opinion, beautiful differences. But then there's that word race. A race is a competition. Now, some people from the the whole Darwinian thing, in its survival of the fittest, makes it sound like a competition. And it's not a competition in any sense of competing with another. The competition is always, to me, based within ourselves. So let's say, if in anything, like even as a bass player, I am only competing with my idea of what a good bass player is. I'm not trying to be better than anybody else. I'm trying to be the best I can be. I only compete with my own concepts of what good is, what excellence is, what integrity is. In other words, I have my own ideal, and I compete towards that ideal. But it's not a race. But a race is a competition with others. I'm going to have to get out of the chat now because I don't know how David Wilcock got into things. All right, so here I am in my own space, and so I can continue. So the human race. To me, the concept of race, for the human animal is a Darwinian insertion. It may look like science as we know it now. It has changed into its present form in the last couple of hundred years. Much of it started by the Royal Society. Some of it can even be Daniel of Dark Journalist Daniel. He is covering some of this material. Daniel's material for me is has its own Telestic process of what he's aiming at. But there's a lot there. Again, when you're taking in data and information from any source, it's how you apply the data. It's your kind of summary of the data. I love scientific data, but I come up with very different interpretations, especially in its applications to living. So, the human animal, the human species, instead of the human race. I don't even want to use the word strive. Again, that is not the language that we use as we describe our reality shapes it somewhat. And so I want to be cautious in the words and the language used as we consider and go into some philosophical, that love of wisdom. That's what philosophy means. Love of wisdom. And sophistry is the love of questions. Okay, so science and religion are partners in a narrative. Religion, as we know it, is there to direct magical thinking and make it very unmagical. Or, to me, take magical thinking and insert a contrived, fantastic, or fantasy world. One that paints the human animal poorly. Obey and you get into heaven type of stuff. Obey is the most big part of the religious narrative. That one, to be a good human animal, one must obey an off-planet being. Okay, enough there. Science is there to kill any magical thinking at all. No magical thinking allowed. Consciousness is an epiphenomenon of our physical brains, according to them. Which is why the Darwinian concept has been a mainstay. It's you can do the organized magical route, or religious way, with the various creation stories, including the Anunnaki one, which is basically a form of the Genesis one. Or you get these are the official accepted ones, the ones that aren't conspiracy theories. I mean, nobody, you're not going to ever bring. People might say, I don't buy that Genesis stuff, but they're not going to say you're indulging in conspiracy theory by bringing up Genesis. Somebody might not agree with the Darwinian method, but they won't accuse you of conspiracy theory bringing up Darwin. That's because both of these ways of apprehending reality are the officially endorsed ones of the system and the rulers. And of course, the word ruler in Greek is archon. And so, and of course, that's what that word gets, because that word has applications in a few energetic and, let's say, dimensional aspects, but it's all the same energy. So it doesn't really matter, oh, you're talking about that kind of archon, this kind of archon. It's the same program. It's the same agenda. It's the same narrative conspiracy. So the concept of a human race, or there being within the human race other races, implies competition. And we want, in my opinion, we want to eliminate language that sets up competition with each other. And you can, I mean, if you don't see the programming in that language to create striving amongst the populations of the human species, perhaps a little meditative time would allow that to break through. Might not break through during a live stream, but a little quiet time, it might happen. Interestingly, I found out in some meditation of time of my own last night, there's a way of catching our planetary animal mother's attention. I mean, it's always there, but there's a way of like kind of really getting a line going. John describes her as autistic. I like that, and I want to actually, and as an Aspie, a little bit on the autistic spectrum. There is, again, I love the word autistic, because to really understand, especially natural autism, not the trauma-based autism that comes from messing with the human animal, like by injecting strange things into a hours-old body, toxic things. Because part of being autistic is being in a state of awe, to be in her dreaming and the awe of it, and how distracted one can get if one can apprehend that awesome dreaming, our awesome mother. And to be, when one is kind of, and especially in the current world that is so out of harmony with the earth, the natural, our planetary animal mother, and wisdom, that part of the quote-unquote ADD, ADHD shit is because the autists are more wrapped up in the awe of our true sovereign existence, of what is really meant to be there. They come with that memory of that awe, and then they come into this world and realize how fucked up it is, how in error it is, and so they're constantly retreating back into the awe. And for me, that's what autistic truly is. So John has described our planetary animal mother, VV, as autistic, and ways to get her attention, to draw her out of her own awe of her creation. Because, again, the aspersion is that the autist is ADD, kind of checked out. No, they're really checked in. They're checked out of the nonsense. They're checked out of the ephemeral silliness of the world that we currently live in. The error of it. So when we approach her, sometimes we're bringing some of her own silliness in there, because we need to process things. I'm gonna mute my channel while I clear my throat. Let's see, where's my mic? Oh, there it is. And so, getting her attention. Now, one of the ways to get her attention is with the Gaian Tantric vow, and that's on metahistory.org, and that's if you're gonna really do planetary tantra. I have done a kind of a form of it many years ago, probably 2010, 2011 at Omega, after cutting myself pretty good on a candle holder that was made of amethyst crystal. But I didn't quite do the formal vow, and I want to do the formal vow partially because I do have a connection, but I want to see how that vow changes it. But the interesting thing is, I came to me last night during a meditation, because sometimes I can really feel her presence, like she's like in my head, and other times it's kind of I haven't quite gotten her attention. And I think I've certainly found one vehicle for me to get her attention, and that's for me to pay any attention in my thinkings that concerns for John Lamb Lash. If I turn my thoughts in any considerable fashion towards John, I catch Vivi's attention. And there was kind of like almost like a giggle with her last night when I picked up on that. And it's yeah, when I pay attention to her intended, she pays attention to me. I mean, like, focus. Which is now like I said, I just got it last night, so I'm gonna work with that. Like I said, my Gaian Tantric vow might occur. I think it should occur this moon cycle. I was like, what am I waiting for? But I do have to pick the. I'm a guitar player. I practice often. I got to pick the right spot on my finger to create the cut. It's called the iron to iron bonding, is another name for it. And the iron that we use is the iron that's in our blood, carried in the hemoglobin. Okay, I'm going to come. I've been out of the chat for a little bit. I'm going to come back in there for a little bit. I think I'm kind of transitioning here. Okay, Jasmine, I guess what I would say about John Lamb Lash being racist is what the definition of a racist is, and that's one of the reasons to me, why he doesn't even call the human race a race, calls it the human animal and the human species, because again, the concept of race, of that there's a difference, in the of the anthropos. There's a lot of misinterpretation there. There are a lot of trigger words that have been planted in narratives about race. And again, I'm not competing with anyone but myself. I'm certainly not competing with another people. I'm certainly not competing with color of skin. And John has really, John occasionally will get feedback because he's thinking he's being understood, then he realizes he's not being understood. He's never apologetic, but he always tries to clear things up. So so his general message, if it's misinterpreted as racist, in my opinion, misinterpreted. If you interpret as racist, that's your perception. But again, he's not apologetic because he, in his own heart, is not coming from a racist perspective, because the word race is not operative in the description of the anthropos. The anthropos is a species. It's an animal. It's not a race. Again, where is this race? Where is this competition? Where's the finish line? Where's the starting line? But anyway, so I want to get back to my own stuff because of the controversy he generates. I feel I can still be coming from the planetary tantric Gnostic view and using my own language, and also I have focuses that I think are less controversial. I mean, I understand the controversy. I'm not ignorant of how he could be interpreted as controversial. Not at all ignorant. But I'm also well aware of the world that those words are landing in, and how the consciousness has been so shaped by controllers, by the rulers, by the agenda creators and then drivers. Okay, I'm looking a little bit, and I think I probably should stay out of the chat for while I kind of go. Yeah. I'll come in and out of the chat, but I'm going to kind of think I'll be more successful kind of staying in keeping to my aim. Okay, so I want to talk about meandering mystic, Nemeta, the race question, and I really, again, the concept of race and races, toxic. There were different cultures. They come from different environments. There were different skin colors, but a race differences. Again, I'm not in a race. I'm in a race with anybody. I refuse to race against anybody. The only race that the human animal is in is the race against control of this world. The race against freedom. That is a real race because there is a competitor there. And that competitor is the archontic mindset, the ruler mindset. Where there is a group of rulers who think that they're the sovereigns, and meanwhile they're not even identifying with the earth. Sovereign comes from a Latin version of the word super. And to be sovereign basically means you're above any control, above any rulers. In other words, no one can be above another sovereign. Sovereigns are equal. There are no rulers. There are no archons on a truly sovereign earth. And sovereignty starts with each individual human animal realizing that they will have no rulers. This isn't to negate that we don't, when we're doing things, that there's one person who's a really good point person, it could be of any gender, and for that particular project, we then have a leader. They're the ones that the organizational skills, the people skills, and also usually the person that can do them when they're like, going to say, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do this? The person that in many ways could do many of the things they're assigning, but they can't do it all. And besides, let's all do this together. So a sovereign has no rulers. So the only race I acknowledge is the race against the archontic ruler control system, because it's racing to capture us. It's racing to plant ideas of melding our consciousness with AI, which again, usually AI is interpreted as artificial intelligence. I really think that the real threat is the alien intelligence, the archontic intelligence, however limited that intelligence is. Okay, what else? Okay, so I mentioned the Tellinger video, and I saw somebody, and I do understand the kind of tie-in Tellinger to Wilcock. And to me, the tie-in is they're both aggregators. David Wilcock kind of, his books like The Wisdom Tea and whatever, he aggregated things and then he puts his own kind of summary on what he's aggregated. Michael Tellinger stayed away from kind of summarizing, other than he thought that the data and discoveries and research that he has aggregated was important to us. So I thought he was being responsible. I think David Wilcock has gone, not only irresponsible, but engaging in some fuckery. And of course, starting a few days ago, we are now officially in autumn. Okay, so we've now done the autumn equinox, and we are in that cycle period. Okay, I think I'm going to break up and get into something a little frivolous. Part of, I guess, what I would consider frivolous is being less telestic, or having an objective that is a little bit frivolous. Let's put it that way. So one of the things that the circuit seems to enjoy, because they participate in the greater circuit, and that greater circuit will be, the various forums, conversations about Q, conversations about Kerry Cassidy, Project Camelot, the kind of the New Age diaspora, just that stuff, the stuff that kind of could be considered truther, conspiracy, New Age, whatever title you want to put it onto. Kind of the material that kind of created this community, intellectual, or intellectual might be stretching the truth. The engagement with these various topics that seem kind of fall under the kind of stuff that you don't talk about it at a family dinner. All right, that stuff. Simon Parks. Those kind of subjects. And I was thinking, I don't know about doing a live stream on it. But I was, last night when I was full of energy, I was inspired to do, I have my mystic brew. And I was thinking about doing something called Brew Age News. Instead of New Age, Brew Age. Because there's certainly quite a bit of ferment and seething cauldron energy going on in all of that. Okay, actually, I'll stay in the chat. Since this is frivolous, I want to be in the chat. Okay, let me get in here. Hello, Amanda. So you've joined us. Hello, Christian Martin. So you've joined us. That's one of the reasons to go into chat, to make sure I've said hello to those who've come in a little bit later. All right. So, I don't know what kind of frequency. I mean, it would be so basically the way I would kind of go about it is, I would. Oh, by the way, Joe from the Carolinas is now a moderator at Project Avalon, and I haven't been following Project Avalon. I was kind of watching some. There was a certain thread there where they were examining the Q material, and I was doing that for a while, and then. Now I have a link to where you can just read the Q posts, and to me that's all I really need. Okay, what is being said? Okay, in other words, what is that? The people who are tracking that, what are they tracking? Data. And then being aware of what's being said, and then following the news cycle and see what connections there might be. So Joe is now, and he's actually moderating a channel. I think he's a general moderator, but he's specifically moderating a channel that has apparently, there has been some material released about the LARP that Q is. Once again, for me, I don't have a whole lot of emotional investment in it. I'm willing to read the data. It doesn't take much time to read it. And you read it and you go, okay, so that's what's being said. We'll see. When you're, there's something, Aristotle, hardly my favorite philosopher, but he did say some things that are occasionally requotable. And there was something about, the sign of, operating intellect is the ability to entertain a thought without accepting it. To me, and what that really means is the ability to take in data around a concept without having to say, oh, I believe that, or I accept that, or I have an emotional investment in it, where you are allowed to be an observer of data streams, of popular movements. So that's what I do. That's why I'm subscribed. I'm not subscribed. I have, a tab. All I have to do is click on it. Did Q put anything anything new? And that way I kind of know what that community is focusing on. And since it supposedly ties into our news cycle, when I go on Z8, on Zero Hedge and read what they put up, which is the closest I can go to kind of staying on top of the news. I also check in with RT. I don't have Russophobia. Again, it's kind of hard to be following the New Earth channel, and especially with my, tracking where our traditions of being the anthropos on the earth, where there's still great wisdom, or at least connection to the earth. And I would say the last bastion of that is in the territory called Russia, and the Russian people, not the Russian government. So when we're discussing Russia, now, of course, the movers and shakers and newsmakers are the Russian government. Sergei Lavrov, Putin, maybe the defense guy Shoigu. But it's the Russian people that are Russia. The Anastasia book, Ringing Cedars books, great wisdom in there. It has echoes of a deeper tradition. Those books kind of come into a little bit into what I would call the mystical side of Orthodox Christianity, which is quite different and actually later than popularly believed, which is the work of Anatoly Fomenko. And so I do read RT because there's the Russian people, and that part of our earth is an important part, and it's like I feel the biggest of the last repositories. I'm quite sure you can find repositories in South America, in Africa, in Australia, in New Zealand, but as far as a landmass, Russia is a huge part of where an older wisdom of being the anthropos, being the human animal, lies. So anyway, I check usually RT late at night, which is usually their early day, the beginning of their news cycle, and then I check Zero Hedge throughout the day. Then I belong to the One Truth Forum, I belong to Earth Empaths, and I belong to iRise. I'm members there. I broke with Project Avalon. I left, although I had been booted out once, but I was received because I won't get into that. But I was taken back in for a purpose that I did not allow myself to get used for. And then I left because I felt that Project Avalon was essentially a Kool-Aid stand. And I wrote a long post when I left, and Kool-Aid was in the subject. But I speak for myself. And if somebody belongs to Project Avalon, I don't see an issue with that. Part of it was like, who I associate with matters to me, and I didn't want to be associated with Project Avalon. Hello, Julie Holland. Hello, Foxadre. Hey. So anyway, I got really juiced up, and I thought, this might be very well received. I'd watched an interesting exchange between Thomas Sheridan and Cara St. Louis about Sardinia. And once again, getting back to some very ancient earth traditions and ways, and the megaliths, and the way we once were before the rulers, or in Greek, the archons, began their rampage across this planet. Again, Rianne Eisler's book, The Chalice and the Blade, is a pretty good tracking of when that rampage really began. And it wasn't all that long ago. And that's the other thing is, false chronologies. And I said this in my last stream. Until we kind of get it sorted out, we can rely on the dating that we currently have. Because it did happen a little while, some years ago, many moons ago. But there's something off about it. And I also think geological dating and radiocarbon dating, I think one can allow us to know that something came before something, but when that timing was in the form of, again, revolutions around the sun, I think there's some of that science is not the best. I think there's some stuff that's off. And I think I do see a method. Now, I won't call it to the madness. Hello, Lita Blue. I do see a method to wanting to make certain time periods seem longer than other, because it wants us to focus on the fuckery and rulership that has taken place in the past, let's say, a couple of thousand years, if not a couple of hundred years. I mean, when it began a couple of thousand years ago, but it really got organized, in my opinion, and my research, probably no more than 400 or 500 years ago, and maybe 500 to me being the absolute longest. Chalice and the Blade is a book by Riane Eisler, and it's really about back when the difference between societies when there was equality with the genders, when the concept of the deity with agency was the earth. Actually, let me share a little piece of art I did. I don't know if you're still here, Meandering Mystic. And part of it was inspired by the, it's actually towards the end of the Michael Tellinger thing about the use of cones, how cones are in our eyes, how beetles use cones to kind of defy gravity with their wings, with these huge bodies. And, cones is a form of energy. Healing technique might have even been used for phasers, and that would be like the same, like a laser is light amplification, whatever. A phaser would be sound being used as what we think of as lasering. So anyway, I was inspired. This was after rehearsal on Friday night. I came to rehearsal, and usually after rehearsal I come back online. I went, I'm not ready to be online yet. I feel too good to open this portal into insanity. So all of a sudden I found myself wanting to do an artistic rendering of our mother, of, again, kind of just like what they call in, what they find all over Europe, especially, what they call the Venus figurines, like you have the Venus of Willendorf and whatever. Again, it has nothing to do with Venus. That's Gaia, okay? That's our planetary animal mother, rendered in an artistic way. And I like the older ones because they're not kind of going into like being sexy. They're into fecundity, fertility, but fecund is the better word. And also the fact that generally when they have like the head shape on this rather blobbish shape with very large breasts and large hips, they never render a face. That facelessness to me is really getting it, and really understanding that if you're going to take the energy, if you're going to take Gaia and put her into some kind of shaping, you don't want to put a face on it. So I'm not finished with this rendition. Anyway, so I started out trying to render a kind of my own version of a Gaia figure. Now, if you understand what I'm saying, I mean like what they traditionally call Venus figures. Again, this is science trying to take our mother and offload her into the planet Venus, to take the divine feminine of Gaia, Sophia herself, and put it on the planet Venus. This is an archontic appropriation, because all of those gods are archontic. They even rule planets. You know, they rule horoscopic signs. They archon them. Yes, in the archontic thing, mother is a kind of a term of polarity. I hope I'm understanding. I'm talking to you, MC Windsor. I'm just seeing it stand in isolation, and but I think we should. I can't imagine we wouldn't be on the same page. So anyway, I started out working with a Vesica Pisces as kind of a shaping, and so I created a rendering of 5 different Vesica Pisces. 1 is the body, being the bigger one, 2 is the legs, and 2 is the breasts. I just, you know, I worked on it for a while. I did it all freehand, and I don't consider myself an artist, but I can draw. I mean, almost anybody can draw. And when I was done, I went no, and then all of a sudden it came to me, don't use the Vesica Pisces, use the cone. And so then I did a different rendering, and the interesting thing is, when what I did was I'm working in pencil, so I erased, rather than going to a new page, I erased the former drawing, because you can never quite get rid of the whole thing through erasure, and I wanted kind of the echo of the former work to be there as it refined itself. So I kind of left it there, and when I show you this, you'll be able to see some of the echoing there. So I think I'm going. One of the things I haven't done yet is I want to get a compass. I have a compass downstairs. And the other thing I want to get is a protractor. I was looking for a protractor when I went to the supermarket last night, and I didn't see one in that little section where they might have, but because there's some of the things I want to draw that I want to use very precise angles, and protractor is the tool for that. And so I want when right now this figure is headless, but I want to draw a perfect semicircle on where the head isn't. And then probably, if you've ever seen the other ones, they kind of like, they sometimes will have, that's exactly what they have there, and then they have like little kind of circlings on there. But I'm going to show you my rendition based on a cone. I'm going to go into my regular thing so I can see this real time. And this is it. Now, if I pull it closer, you're going to see where I had the Vesica, Vesica Pisces. These are the, you see like little echoes or shadows of where I had legs before I changed things up. But what I'm working with here, and this is, like I said, this is not done. This is just my first kind of rendering, and I don't draw that much. This was kind of how I move my energy, but this is my beginning concept of just a nice representation. And I haven't done the math yet, but I'm kind of thinking in a Fibonacci spiral sequence. So you have 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and I like 8 as the kind of like the unit number. So if this represented an 8, so if you were to take the height of the overall figure here, and then break it up into 8 discrete parts, that the breasts would be corresponding to 3 of those 8 discrete parts. If I'm at 5 would be, so the whole thing is I'm trying to work with Fibonacci proportions. And so, the next proportion from 8 would be 5, but we can also go to 3. You don't have to, the proportions all fit together. They don't have to be sequential. So anyway, that was my little inspiration there. Well, actually, it's Sunshine on Sophia. What I want to do is this naturally occurring clay around here, and a friend of mine is doing some digging, and it's just pure clay. There's no organic material in it, and it molds really nice. And I would like to render it, and I would want to render it like here's like a little, this little cone-shaped thing that was part of a pendulum I had, and I used this to kind of help me with what I did there. But I'd like to form an actual kind of like a cone, something that can actually be held and used, because there's energy in the cone device. But so I want to do that, and then I figure I don't have a kiln, and sun baking is a fairly good way, to harden clay. But I figure what I'll do is I'll stove bake it. I'll put in some potatoes and make some baked potatoes while when I finally get that finished. Yeah, so we've been having a lot of fun. No, it wouldn't be a vessel. It wouldn't be a vessel. It would just, it would be like a solid cone. To me, not meant to contain anything. Also, because I mean, I don't have any wheels. This is just me taking clay, making sure it's moist enough, and then using my hands to shape it. And I've never ever done pottery in my life either. So I mean, these are just. Oh, rock cool it in the fire. Yeah, that's another concept. I like that. So yeah, so that was a nice little inspirational thing that I did after my rehearsal with Uncle Butchie, and we have a gig not this Friday, the Friday after. I'm looking forward to that. And we're going to be performing my "Go to Your Room" song. I'm excited about it being my first public, my first public performance of it, and especially with a band. I did try it at one open mic night, but that was and I think I shared that where I brought my notebook up, and I had turned to the wrong page. So when I went to go to the next verse, there was a blank page, and when I ran to the blank page, my brain went pretty blank too. I don't know. I'm gonna try and have video of it. I want to have video of it. Let's put it that way. But I don't have a camera of my own to do. Somebody told me they were going to actually, somebody who knows Butch, they were going to give me a camera, and then all of a sudden they decided they were going to do things with the camera, so I couldn't get it, but they've never done anything. Hello, Forrest Little. All the clay has lead in it, and that the reason why the clay has lead in it, and I actually spoke with that in 1 or 2 streams ago, is because of I don't know how many years of leaded gasoline. Leaded gasoline is why all clay that you didn't need to finish. These days, if you have a crack in ceramics, you could get lead poisoning from it. That was not the case 100 years ago. I've actually read things like people who have had coffee cups that sometimes will get cracks in the glaze, and then having strange kind of neurological conditions, and then when they check in, they find out they have low-level lead poisoning. So, okay, I think I'm going to move on. I actually have 2 more topics to discuss. Good night, Amanda. So the next thing I put on here was kind of going into altered states, and this is gonna really kind of deal with animal medicine. And in many ways tying in with what Rupert Sheldrake identifies as morphogenetic fields. And one of the things I want to listen to his discussion with Joe Rogan. One of the reasons I can sometimes enjoy Joe Rogan interviewing certain people is because he's a little bit of a skeptic, and also he's wants to stay online. So he's a little towing the line. So so he kind of represents the general population a lot more intelligent than the general population. But I find he's a good foil for the great minds. That he'll challenge them in ways that people might challenge us when we bring up certain ideas. And he has some amazing people on there from time to time. And so I know he has one with Rupert Sheldrake, and I want to listen to that one. I was exposed to the concepts of morphogenetic fields in 1988. And it came through my book on gems and vibrational healing. And in there they were speaking a little bit about how gemstones can work with morphogenetic fields. Okay, I'm going to get out of the chat here. Reset myself. Morphogenetic fields. So I'd heard about the morphogenetic field, and in reading about it, I grokked it. I kind of took it in holistically with a W. And I got it. But I knew that, and then I knew that and in the material I was reading, it was, I guess in the footnote, it kind of referenced the book by Rupert Sheldrake, because it mentioned morphogenetic fields. Had it was book, the book notes. And when I went down and looked at the reference, it was Rupert Sheldrake's A Science of Life. So in the early 90s, I had been speaking about it, and I was doing my massage career, and I had mentioned to somebody the book, and they very generously sent me Rupert Sheldrake's Science of Life. And fortunately, it was the updated version, because when he first came out, he was savagely attacked by the scientific community. And in this later book, which I think was almost released 20 years after he first wrote it, I think he released it possibly in the early 80s, if not late 70s, I forget exactly, but he's had that, it's been out for a while. And so in the later version, he has actually had letters from people who had savagely attacked him when the Science of Life was first released, but they had come to some peace and saw the correction of it. So this is actually tying into my experience of dealing shamanically with animal spirits. And even dealing with the medicine cards. Because, they won't speak of, like, the otter. They speak of otter, crow, okay? So when in the animal cards, what is being referenced is the morphogenetic field or the coherence of that particular species, including its subspecies. there's kind of, you get into fractals. Okay, the fractals are kind of duplications of a larger piece. So, because I actually had a pretty good experience the other night, and it seems to be going pretty good. I hope there is no jinx effect. But there were 3 dogs that live about 3 or 4 houses down from me, and there's I think there's 2 on one side of the street and 1 on the other side of the street. There is, yeah, it depends on, but there's 2 on one side, 1 on the other. And when one of them barks, they all bark. And and they're in their dog space. They enjoy making the sounds that dogs use to exchange information with each other with their ability to make sound. And one night it was particularly cacophonous, and also I was trying to fall asleep. And a lot of times I'm falling asleep when it's already light out, so the world is awake. People are moving, cars are moving, the dogs are reacting the way they react. So I found myself getting angry, or pissed off at the dogs for just, being so noisy. Disturbing my peace. And I started actually, not have the nicest thoughts about these dogs. And finally, I was able to kind of calm that down, get into my wisdom center, and realize, okay, well, let's communicate. So first I kind of extended my, kind of like telepathic communication to the dogs themselves. Nah. Then I reached out to dog, the morphogenetic field, the intelligence, the central intelligence of dog. Spoke to it, and very shortly thereafter they calmed down. And I realized that this was how I find peace with those dogs, was by forming my friendship with dog. Not the dogs, dog. And so, and this is kind of tied into some, let's say, shamanic intel from just working in those spaces, that one of the great things, and one of the things that will help communicating with the animal spirits, with moose, with dog, with elk, with otter, with deer, armadillo, on and on, hummingbird, spider. In the shamanic space, we come not as this like special or arrogant human into, like, the space of moose. We come as the human animal into that space. In that shamanic space, if we're entering it correctly, we come in as the human animal. And we're interacting with the otter animal, the moose animal, the dog animal. We're meeting as equals. All of us unique, but we meet as equals. And we each have our own unique wisdom owing to the way we experience our earth walk. And which is why, this is, I'm at a crossroads and where to go. Which one finishes it? So for me to, one of the beauties of using the right language to even identify ourselves is when we're entering the shamanic space, go as the human animal, like the Aboriginal dream time. We're part of nature. In our real, when we really get it, we are part of nature, not part of some, sky god creation. We are as much a part of this earth as every other living thing on this earth is. It's a shared experience. It's a shared experiment. So one of the, like, there's an animal whisperer. She did the work with that black leopard, or panther, some people sometimes call them, the black leopard called Diablo, and he was a badass, and they couldn't integrate him. And then she had a conversation, got his history. Okay, the same woman also, I saw her sharing her communications with the great white sharks. One second. Around the Great Barrier Reef of Australia, and them speaking about how, their environment shrieking, how that they as the uber predators they are, don't necessarily like being around a lot of their own kind, because again they're meant to be hunters. So if they're widespread, they're not competing with each other for the same morsel of food. When they're in this kind of wide ranging, each one gets its own meal. When they're clustered, one gets a meal and the others are like, hey man, there ain't a whole lot of meals around here, we want some of that meal too. So that creates a real anxiety in the current great white shark populations, and exacerbates the fact that they're moody and that they are actually snippy. Like a dog might nip you if it's all snippy. Well, if a great white shark nips you just out of anxiety without intention to eat you, you might still bleed to death real quickly. And of course, once your blood's in the water, then other signals kick on in the nervous system of these sharks. And when I kind of get down, like, let's say, again, so she's able to get in this, in the case of the panther, of the black leopard, it seemed like it was a pretty much of a one-on-one. But I also feel that that those communications are facilitated by the the overarching intelligence of that morphogenetic field of that species. Especially in the case of in other words, like when she was speaking to great white about, like, she was thinking, she was communicating with, and they were giving her information, but the information is kind of being in the cloud. And in many ways, the morphogenetic fields are kind of, in a way, if you a natural cloud system where all the species is storing their data input into this central repository of consciousness. And those clouds of consciousness, those coherencies, the repositories where the collective experience of a species is aggregated. So therefore the intelligence of each participant becomes a shared intelligence. Just how the mycelium fields that Meandering Mystic speaks about in his video, how if one piece of this, many fingers reaching out into the soil learns a new trick, the whole organism knows it at once. And it's shared through that morphogenetic field, instead of having to do a chemical transition, like, oh, I found this, let me send out the chemicals that contain the information. Those chemicals will ultimately be produced, but they're kind of shadowing or mirroring or echoing the original energetic or frequency send, where that new sense data is discovered and then it pulses out, and that pulse is then picked up by the whole organism in basically instantaneous time. So so the human animal entering into what the Aborigines might call dream time, or even if you take an entheogen, and you're going into that space and you're encountering animals, remember you're an animal, and approach animals as one. You're now you said this specialize, human, or gee, I can talk to the animals here. Well, duh, you're an animal too. And there is great wisdom in understanding that you're part of the animal kingdom, that we're part of the animal kingdom. I want to watch my pronouns there. And I have a final, maybe I'll save my final topic. Let me because we're like 10 minutes into towards 2 hours, and I'm getting ready to wrap this up here. Very good, MC. Being a watcher instead of offense or defense. Especially, again, I just getting out of the chat because I don't want to get pulled into it, because I do have my material to deliver, and then I can come back and enjoy what's been going on there. Okay. Yeah, so the last topic, and I'm gonna be winding down. If any, now I'm in the chat, so occasionally I do see a question asked. So this is a good time for me just to engage with the chat without having anything more to say. I will mention the topic, and that was the topic of the Christos, sometimes pronounced Christos, and a little bit about that. The aeon, and then the creation of the egregore that has built up with a certain mythos around that aeon, kind of central to Christianity, is the kind of the Christian mythos, and the different forms that the quote unquote the Christ energy takes. Some of them have him as the Prince of Peace. Other have him as the holy, the holy soldier bringing in the army of God to bring in the end times. Okay, two very different egregores. I will type in the word egregore, so if you wish to, if you don't know what it is, at one time, obviously, I didn't know what it was either. Actually, where I first heard, I'll tell you where I first heard the word egregore. It was, who was that wild Italian guy? I mean, I like him. He's gotten saner over the years. He's the one who speaks about the Vatican a lot. And he's a member of the, I guess, some kind of Italian Illuminati. Oh, his name is, but anyway, he's the first person I heard. He was the one who introduced the term egregore to me, and I tuned into it and I went, ooh. My take on Lucifer is a little difficult to pin down, Niche, because Lucifer is different things to different people. In other words, there's a paper written by John Lash that the real Lucifer is Sophia. But then there's also this Lucifer that's the rebellious angel, and Lucifer. Then there's a Lucifer is conflated with the adversary. So there's the bringer of light. There's the rebellious one, and then there's the adversary, which is actually Satan. But the conflation of Satan with Lucifer is just really sloppy. Very sloppy. For me, Lucifer in many ways is a contrivance, although it's, not complete. But the concept that we play with, to me, Lucifer can be, I ignore Lucifer as a concept, because with John's paper, if John's assertion is correct that the real Lucifer is Sophia, fine, then she's Sophia for me. That's Mama. That's Planetary Animal Mother, Planetary Sovereign Intelligence, VV. So those are the names. I don't and even with the organic light, you can see with Lightbringer that she brings the organic light. So it's all that works for me. The thing is that there is what the word evokes in people, and to me, what the word evokes is tied in a lot with what I consider to be Abrahamic cosmology, and I want to just disengage from that shit fest. So for me, Lucifer is just like, I wish if I never heard the name again, I'd be quite happy. Yeah, I didn't think you would, Niche. I know, obviously I know you, so I know that you are not caught up in the kind of limited thinking that would put Lucifer and Satan into the same category. Especially, again, one means light bringer, and at best rebeller, and one means adversary. Their energies are very, very different. Yeah, yes, definitely. It says, the whole Satan, as because the whole Zodic tradition to be righteous. That whole piety and holy instead of sacred. The law instead of the way. So, so anyway, so I was one of the topics was Christos, and I was going to share like some of my experiences actually through, with that aeon, and how even like with in earlier entries on meta history, going back like probably to 2009 or earlier, the syzygy or the pairing of Sophia, originally he had posited as Christos. He is now, it's been updated, it's now Thelete. And Christos is an aeon, a unique aeon in its own right, but as a kind of a polarity, I could say his. With the whole concept of chrism, beautiful concept, but that's, again, I don't want to I'm just jumping around a little bit here, and I would like to flesh that out a little bit. And I also think it's important in planetary Tantra, especially since some of the old, there's John has put out so much work, so going back and then just doing the edits would be quite time consuming. So in certain ways, he's already spoken to them, if you've listened to him, but in certain cases, I'm kind of, an exposure to planetary Tantra Gnostic thought, and so I can put in some of the clarifications from my end here, in helping with the aim, helping with the the telestic transmission here. The Aeon Crestos is a really is a great is a great Aeon, and it's interesting. In most cases, Aeons tend to come out in syzygies or pairings. There's something that I pick up from, and occasionally I think there are anomalies in how the originator emanates the Aeons. And it really does seem to me, and it could be where even some of the mythos and some of the more mystical perceptions of the Crestos come in. There does seem to, in my own, at least, shamanic interaction with the Crestos, that he is a bachelor Aeon. In other words, he's not paired. That makes him very available, and because of the kind of work that I perceive him doing, that availability is much to our advantage, and was much to the advantage of our planetary animal mother when she was first trying to settle in, and life was exploding all over the planet, in the oceans, just everywhere. And she needed some assistance with calming things down. She needed a little of that chrism to just kind of take some of the edge off there. And Crestos was the one who was sent to her to ease her transition from a plasma being, an Aeon, into a planet. Although at the core of our planet, rather than an ion core, I believe there's a plasma core. I believe that she has never stopped being the plasma she is, but she was able to pull some of the Kenoma. The Kenoma is the material that's in the galactic arms, attract that to her through the coherence of her field, kind of like, like a little mini galactic field, and build up enough solidity that she had a shell, and that's what we live on. That's our planet Earth. But that's the Aeon, and then there's also, again, I'm kind of going against what I said. I think I could do a better treatment. This is like the Cliff Notes version of where I might normally go. And then there's the egregore of, I'll call more properly, kind of like an egregore based on an earth character, Yeshua, Jesus, Yasos. But that's, that deserves a better treatment. So there's the Aeon, and then there's the egregore. And when you're working with that energy, especially when you're working with the non combative aspect of it, and I really feel that most people who consider themselves Christians are actually working with the Prince of Peace concept. It is usually the more the dispensationalists and the bring on the end times crowd. They have a different egregore. But when you kind of tune into that energy, you attract. Well, I shouldn't say. You kind of get to select who you're going to deal with. And Fox or Dre, I was doing some investigation of Uranus because I have some. I just have a lot of curiosity about Uranus because of the earlier, what I consider the primordial Greek myth of the Uranus Gaia simplicity. But anyway, and I think I'll give that a treatment. But supposedly there are oceans. Supposedly in the inner core of Uranus, there are oceans of liquid diamonds in Uranus. Anyway, that could be a whole other topic, but I have some trepidation about going there, and also the utility of necessarily going there. Utility is important. We do have an adversary. It is the rulers of this world, the psychopathic nature and anti-life, the nature-hating anti-life rulers of this world. And just because they might show some affection towards their own doesn't make them pro-life. So once again, anybody who thinks I smoke too much, this is a cigarette I lit up 2 hours ago. The same cigarette. Yeah. So anyway, that is the end. The one question that came into me was. Niche asked me my thoughts on Lucifer, and I shared them to the best of my ability. I hope I did okay there. Hope I satisfied somewhat. Yeah, well, yeah, I can imagine how you're sounding it, Madfinger. That's why I say Uranus. Of course, the original was Uranos. So I'm trying to keep with that because Uranus, okay, we know that just leads into all kinds of stuff. But then we also have another pronunciation that's not Uranus, but Uranus. I come from New York City. I traveled in the subway trains many years of my life. I know the smell of Uranus. And so when I engage the energy of Uranus, it isn't particularly Uranus to me. So that's why I like Uranus. And if I were to go Uranos to the average person, what are you, being pretentious? If I did say it, in many ways, even though I was trying to be correct, it would be pretentious. So Uranus is how I say it. That is pretty fascinating, Foxes Ray, what you put in there, and I can work. I mean, that's the first time I'm reading that particular stream there, and I'm like, oh, I like that. Although again, I find room for parsing some of that out, but not during a telestic transmission. The telestic transmission live streams, there are places in my own musings and my own intel gathering that are extra. I come up sometimes with things that can be considered extra, even commentary on the Sophianic narrative, the trunk and roots and some branches of our tree of wisdom. And I hold the Sophianic narrative as sacred. And so conversations that I consider commentaries that I feel actually naturally arise, especially from our natural curiosity and unpacking. There's much fruit to be pulled off of that tree of wisdom. But there again, we are in times where I think when sitting around in a campfire. That's the other thing is certain ideas I want to knock around. I would like at least in a Zoom meeting where I see the faces, I hear the voices, and it's not a chat other people able to express themselves as humans do, with voice, inflection, and all the rest of that good stuff. You know, you don't have to worry about typos and all the rest of that nonsense. But I like that pleuromic probe concept a lot. So anyway, all right. I was trying to close. I was, working towards making this only 2 hours long, but it's now 2 hours 11 minutes, and I will be saying good night. So those who were here, there was a handful or two. That probably more like 2 handfuls when I extended warm greetings. Warm greetings to those who came in during this stream, and now a very warm departure ritual of saying goodbye for now to you all, and thank you for being here for, again, a live stream that is thoughtful and complimentary to the what I'm doing here, and it's really it's working out very well. I really couldn't be happier with the vibe, the ambiance that it gets created in these live streams, and again, with the participation of the people in the live chat. So thank you all. Take care of yourselves. Remember the dreaming. Enter that dreaming as often as you can, and experience the calm, and experience the sanity of it. And until next week, as far as live streams go, I extend my love to you all.